What's up builders, it's me, Jimbotron. In today's video, we're covering one of my favorite builds to use with friends. This is Falcon Protocol. I'll be explaining the build through live gameplay, but as always, full detailed build guide is in the description. Let's get into it. I would like to start this video off with a large disclaimer that you will probably mainly want to do this with your friends. This build has crazy, oppressive hard carry potential, but it requires coordination to actually get full value out of it. So if your team is not playing around you, then it can feel a bit inconsistent. The core principle of this build is the Falconer power. This gives your teammates 25% ultimate charge and 30% attack speed on top of the base 50% damage boost and 30% damage reduction whenever you use nano boost on them. On its own, this power is genuinely really strong when you are paired with somebody, since you are not only giving them ultimate charge, but also directly buffing how strong their ultimate is if it scales with attack speed like Soldier or Genji. However, it can be harder to get consistent value out of in solo queue if your teammates do not understand how to play around it. But if it is only on nano boost, then surely that makes it a weak power, right? That would be true if that was the full story, but we also take nano nade. This power is not explained very clearly in-game other than being described as a weaker nano boost. But what it actually does is turn every grenade into a mini nano, and any falconer effects along with that. It increases the base healing of your grenade by 60 and grants a 12.5% damage boost, 7.5% damage reduction, and with Falconer, 7.5% attack speed and 6.25% ultimate charge to teammates hit by it for a short duration. So what was a nice power has been turned into an amazing one. Now comes the true synergy stacking. We add in Fountain of Soothe, which gives you a second grenade at a reduced effect. However, this reduction does not affect the nano effect on your grenades, meaning both grenades are still giving full ultimate charge and all of the bonus stats. This effectively doubles the value you are getting from Nano Nade and Falconer, since a double grenade will give 12.5% ultimate charge to you and anyone else on the team it hits. This means instead of only getting value when you nano boost, you are now constantly feeding your team and yourself buffs and ultimate charge every time you use your grenade, which massively increases the consistency of the build and turns it from a single ability spike into something that is always active. The final power is Team Nano, and this one is pretty self-explanatory. You give Nano Boost, along with all of its bonus effects, healing, and ultimate charge to your entire team. If you make it to round 6, this genuinely becomes an I win button every time you have it available, especially when your team understands how to play around it. To take this even further, we combine it with Cluster Core, which reduces your grenade cooldown by 1 second per target you hit. This allows you to get massive cooldown reduction when hitting multiple teammates, meaning you can throw grenades far more frequently. In situations where you hit your entire team, you can get up to around 40% effective cooldown reduction, which just lets you spam grenades and continuously generate value. Finally, you add Refresher into the mix, and this is where things start to get a bit crazy. I understand why a lot of people do not like Refresher, because it is expensive and gives very little in terms of stats, so it can feel like a bad purchase. However, rather than look at it like that, think of it like an 8-second cooldown reduction bonus every 60 seconds, which is technically the best cooldown item in the game since 10% cooldown items only give 6 seconds of cooldown reduction per minute. And it's also a burst reduction, so you can use it to double stack your abilities to do some crazy stuff. I do think the item is useless in most builds, but this is one of the few cases where it actually makes perfect sense and shows why it cannot really be buffed. Other than that, for items we are taking things like Dash Boots and IV Drip, which is a very common Ana combo. This helps boost your survivability, especially with how many grenades you are using, and gives you enough mobility to position properly and keep up with the pace of the build. IV Drip helps out because a general rule you should follow with this build is to be selfish with the grenades. Since your ultimate also gives other ultimate charge, you want to make sure all the grenades hit you personally, and it makes up for your lack of survival. Overall, you are giving up a large amount of your ability to solo impact fights through raw damage or stats, but in return, you gain the ability to massively increase the strength of your entire team. You are constantly feeding them ultimate charge and buffs, meaning even without high economy or damage numbers, you can very easily end up being the MVP shadow carry of the match, which in my opinion fits perfectly with the support playstyle. Now let's see how this actually plays out in game. I'm going to show you an example of me pulling this off with completely random teammates somehow, and I want you to see how oppressive this is. I start the round with 25% ultimate charge because I took Junker Whatsamajig. A useless item, but I'll get into what cases you can take this later after the play. I want you to pay very close attention to the ultimate meters at the top of the screen. Bearing in mind we haven't fought yet, look at how the first fight is about to go. Absolutely destroyed, right? To be expected, we had 5 ultimates, and one of them was a nano boost to the entire team. We did use 2 more to clean up, which honestly wasn't needed, but it's fine because we now have 2 ultimates going into the second fight, whereas our opponents have none. And by the time they do have their ultimates up, we will also have a full team nano ready, so it's basically impossible to get the ultimate advantage online when playing against this Ana build. Unfortunately, this vendetta has a vendetta against me, so I did just get focused, which is the main downside to this build. Because you are encouraged to use your grenades immediately on cooldown for more ultimate charge, you are often vulnerable to being targeted, which is why I like to run with a Rally Brig build, since she can keep the threats off of you while still getting benefits from the ult charge. Something else I do want to comment on when picking the team synergies is to consider not only whose ultimates benefit from the attack speed, but also who has the most expensive ultimates. If you didn't know, every ultimate in the game has a cost of a certain amount of points, some more than others. And Ana's Falcon grenades give a 6.25 flat percentage value, meaning they will actually be more valuable when ran with a team of expensive and high impact ults, like a Gravitron for example. So then, let's review the final scores, shall we? As always, we rate the builds on 4 main categories, those being how much impact the build can have on a game, how strong it is in the early game, how well it scales into the late game, and last but certainly not least, how fun the build is to play. The first category is impact, and I have to say, despite being one of the lower stat builds in the game, this build is one of my only 10 out of 10 impact builds in all of Stadium. Honestly, if you manage your cooldowns properly and do the job as the build intends, the entire game turns into a shut the Ana down or we lose every fight kind of game. I don't think it requires more justification than the whole pace of the game being in your hands. As for early game though, this build is getting a 5 out of 10. Your round 1 kind of stinks because your best build option going into late game with this is Falconer, which, although it does have high impact, doesn't generate any additional cash, which goes against my typical round 1 power should always generate cash mentality. As for your round 2, it is a bit better considering you will have the Fountain of Youth and the infamous IV drip and skates combo we were talking about, but really, the full build doesn't happen until round 4. However, on the other hand, with scaling, this build is a 10 out of 10 for scaling. Every round you play, this thing becomes so much more impactful relative to everybody else, and if you make it to round 6, your team has basically already won because of how absurd the Team Nano and Falconer combo is. Late game, there is no support. I would rather have on my team more than this one. And finally, as for fun, this build is a 6 out of 10. Honestly, if you are 5 stacking every game, this is such a satisfying build, and in those scenarios, this build is going to be an easy 10 minutes for the fun meter. But this video is being made by a solo queuer and made for your average player who probably plays with only 1 or 2 people. Outside of the fun team strategy, you have a game of low cash generation and constant targeting ahead of you, which can make this build difficult to enjoy sometimes. Overall, this build is scoring a 7.75 out of 10, and I think every one of those points is deserved. Anyway builders, that's all for this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps me stay motivated to make these. Till next time builders.